The king stood at the top of his great castle, and as he looked down towards the rolling North Sea, there he could see his son and his daughter. Now his son had a sword in his hand, bright and sharp and shiny, and he raised it high above his head, and he was just about to chop off his sister's head. But that's not where the story starts. Oh, there was a king, a great king who lived in a castle in a place called Bamborough. He had a wife and he had 2 children, and he would always look down towards the great dark North Sea, and he'd watch his children as they played by the side of the North Sea. And every morning they would go out and play with the crabs in the rock pools. They would look at the islands that were close to that place, the Farne Islands. If you look upon a map, you'll see that they're there. And every morning they would go out and they would count the Farne Islands, and every day they came up with a different number. They gave them names: Glororum, Shad, and there was one that they called the Nameless Rock, and they called it the Nameless Rock because they couldn't think of a name for it. And they lived well inside of that great castle in Bamborough in the north of England. Now, his son was called the Child Wind. It was not that he was a child, he was neither a man nor a boy, and at that time anyone who ever wanted to become a knight with a sword in his hand and a shield in front of him, proudly dressed in all of his armour, when they were neither a man nor a boy, then they were known as a child. Now the king's daughter was beautiful to behold, and her name was the fair and lovely Margaret, and the 2 of them would play by the side of the North Sea. But one day the Queen died. The king's heart was broken. He didn't know what to say or what to do. And to make things even worse, his son, the Child Wind, decided that he would go and become a knight. And now he had lost his wife and his son, all in a short space of time. But his daughter, the fair and lovely Margaret, was tall and strong, beautiful and clever. And she walked up to her father and said, Father, please give me a silver key that will open a door inside of Bamborough Castle." And the king knew exactly what his daughter was trying to do. She was trying to distract him, to make him feel better about all of the losses that had occurred in his life. And he gave her one of the silver keys that opened a door inside of the castle. And the fair and lovely Margaret, she made sure that there was a fire burning in the grate, that it was swept out, and all of those people who worked for the fair and lovely Margaret said they would never work for anyone else because she was so kind and so good as a mistress. And she asked her father for another key, and another, and another. And soon she had not 1, not 5, not 10, not 20, but 24 silver keys that she kept on a golden hoop at her shoulder. And now there were no more silver keys, for she was the mistress of this great castle and could gain entry through every door. And when she asked her father for another key, there was no other key than the great golden key that opened the gates at the front of Bamborough Castle. But there were no more silver keys, and the king knew this. For all in this world, all he had was the great golden key that opened the front of the gates at Bamborough Castle. And it was when he took this and he handed it over to his daughter, and when he looked into fair and lovely Margaret's eyes, all he could see were the eyes of his own dead wife. And if his heart had been broken before, then it was truly broken now. And he handed over the key for the gates to Bamborough Castle, and he took to his bed, and he laid in that place for 7 days and 8 nights. Now this is a story from a long time ago, and at that time everyone would want to see their king, and when they couldn't see the king, they became nervous and frightened, for he would provide them with food in their bellies and a roof above their heads, and they could not see him, and they would go to his great chamber and they would knock upon the door, and still he would not rise. Now I have told you already that the fair and lovely Margaret was tall and strong, witty and clever, and she knew that her father liked nothing more and nothing less in all of this world than to go out hunting. She called all of the men who lived in that place together. She got them to be ready by the gates to Bamborough Castle, all upon their horses, ready to go out hunting. And she went up the great stairs and went to her father's chamber and opened up the door, for she had the key. And she said, "Father, all of the men are ready to go out hunting, and you must ride at their front." The king knew that she was right, and so he rose from out of his bed, and down the great stairs he went, and outside. And as soon as he stood outside of the gates, everyone cheered. They were so pleased to see their king once more. And he started to ride. And as he rode through all of the trees and the forests to go out hunting. Now it so happened that there was a woman, a witchetty kind of a woman, who had wanted to be the Queen of Bamborough Castle for nigh 200 years. And when she saw how heartbroken the king was, she knew that this was her chance. And so, in the way that all witches can, she changed her guise. She disguised herself and changed herself into a hare. A black hare that was as jet black as the night from the tip of its nose to the tip of its tail, long straight black ears that hung the full length of its body. And this woman, this witchetty woman in the guise of a jet black hare, ran in and out of all of the king's men as they were riding. Now the king looked down, and he'd never seen such a creature before in all of his life, and he started to follow after it. And he followed further and deeper and harder into the woods until he found himself far away from all of his men in the heart of the forest. And as he looked, there he saw that there was not a hare, but a woman with her back to him, with a long black hair that ran the full length of her body, and she was there with her hair caught in all of the brambles and the bushes in the thicket. Now the king wouldn't wait for a second. He jumped from his horse and started to pull her hair from out of the thorns, and sure enough, his fingers were pricked and the blood did drip down, and it mingled with her hair, and then she whispered weirding words, so that when she turned around, she looked like the most beautiful woman in all of this world, and he fell to his knees, and he begged and he pleaded with her to marry him. "Oh yes, I shall marry you," said this woman, "but only if you make me the Queen of Bamborough Castle. It's yours. You shall become the Queen. But you must give me the 24 silver keys that are held upon a golden hoop, and you must give me the great golden key that opens the gates at the front of Bamborough Castle. It's yours." And in all of that time, the king forgot about his own daughter, the fair and lovely Margaret. But the two of them were married in amongst all of the trees, and the two of them rode back from that place, side by side, and everyone lined themselves up by the side of the road to see this new queen as she came close. They cheered, they shouted, they wanted to see this queen with her jet black hair that ran the full length of her body. And they rode towards Bamborough Castle, where everyone was waiting.